Story 1. The Locked Room in Chicago. I moved to Chicago last year looking for a fresh start. My new apartment was in an old but well-maintained building near downtown. It wasn't fancy, but it had charm, high ceilings, wooden floors, and a vintage look. The landlord was an older man who seemed a bit off, but friendly enough. The only odd thing was a locked room at the end of the hallway. I asked about it when I signed the lease, but the landlord shrugged. "Storage," he said vaguely, refusing to elaborate. I didn't press further, figuring it wasn't my business. The first few nights were quiet, and I quickly settled into a routine. But after a week, I started hearing faint noises. It wasn't coming from my unit, but from that locked room. At first, it was just soft creaking, like someone shifting their weight. I chalked it up to old pipes or settling wood. But then one night, I heard something distinct, 3 slow knocks, rhythmic and deliberate. They came from inside the locked room. I froze in bed, listening as my pulse pounded in my ears. The next morning, I convinced myself I had imagined it. The apartment was old, noises were normal. But as the days passed, the knocks continued, always 3, always at random hours of the night. I debated telling the landlord, but feared sounding paranoid. Instead, I tried ignoring it. One night, I was up late working on my laptop when I heard something new, a shuffling sound, like someone dragging their feet just beyond the locked door. My stomach tightened as I muted my music and strained to listen. The sound stopped, but a moment later, I heard a soft sigh, like someone exhaling deeply. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and stepped hesitantly into the hallway. The locked door stood as it always had, unmoving, silent. I reached out, placing my hand against it. The wood felt colder than it should have. As I pulled away, I heard a whisper, just one word, barely audible. "Help." I stumbled back into my apartment, slamming the door shut and locking it. My mind raced for explanations, maybe a trapped animal, a prank. But the voice had been human, clear and desperate. I barely slept, jumping at every sound. When morning came, I went straight to the landlord. He dismissed my concerns with a wave of his hand. Buildings old, noises happen, not meeting my eyes. When I insisted I'd heard a voice, his expression darkened. "Don't go near that door," he warned. "And don't ask about it again." His tone left no room for argument. I returned to my apartment, more uneasy than ever. That night, I barricaded my door with a chair and kept the hallway light on. Around 2:00 a.m., I heard something I couldn't ignore, a slow, steady tapping. Not from the locked room, but from my own front door. I held my breath, gripping my phone with trembling hands. The tapping continued, patient and persistent. Slowly, I crept to the peephole and peered outside. The hallway was empty. The tapping stopped the moment I looked. My stomach twisted into knots. I stepped back, heart hammering. when my phone vibrated in my hand. A text from an unknown number read, "Why did you stop knocking?" A cold chill spread through my body. My fingers fumbled to block the number, but my hands were shaking too much. The next morning, I packed a bag. I didn't know where I was going, but I couldn't stay another night. As I reached my door, I hesitated. I needed answers. Summoning my courage, I walked to the locked room. My fingers brushed the handle it turned. The door was unlocked. Inside was nothing but darkness. The air was thick, heavy, carrying a damp, rotten scent. I took a cautious step forward, my phone's flashlight illuminating the space. The room was empty except for deep scratches along the walls and a single small mattress on the floor. Then I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Carved into the wooden floorboards just beneath my feet were the words, "Don't leave me." My breath caught as the door behind me suddenly slammed shut. I spun around, my pulse hammering in my ears. The door was closed. No, not just closed. It was locked. My shaking hands fumbled for the handle, twisting it desperately, but it wouldn't budge. The air in the room felt thicker, pressing against my skin like a heavy weight. Then I heard it again, the whisper, "Help me." This time it was closer, right behind me. My phone's flashlight flickered, casting uneven shadows across the scratched walls. I turned slowly, heart pounding, but the room was empty, or at least it looked empty. I stepped backward, my heel hitting something soft, the mattress. But as my light passed over it, I saw something that nearly made me drop my phone. A deep indentation in the fabric, as if someone had just been lying there. And then, the worst part, it started rising. I staggered back, slamming into the wall. My breath came in short, ragged gasps. The air grew colder, and the faint sound of scratching filled the room. It wasn't coming from the walls, it was coming from inside them. I pressed my ear against the surface, straining to listen. A voice, muffled but unmistakable, whispered from within the wall, "Don't go." My entire body seized with fear. I pounded on the door, screaming for help, but my voice felt swallowed by the thick air. Then, suddenly, the scratching stopped. The silence was worse. A soft creak broke the stillness. The mattress was shifting, as if something was trying to sit up. My flashlight flickered again, the shadows stretching unnaturally. Then, from the darkness, I heard the slow dragging of footsteps moving toward me. Terror gripped me. I clawed at the door, yanking at the handle with all my strength. The air behind me grew icy, a presence pressing closer. Just when I thought I'd black out from fear, the door burst open on its own, sending me tumbling into the hallway. I scrambled to my feet and ran. I didn't look back, didn't stop, just bolted from my apartment, slamming the door shut and locking every bolt. My chest heaved as I listened to silence. Then, just as I began to think I was safe, my phone vibrated in my hand. Another message from the unknown number. "You shouldn't have left me. I stared at the screen, my hands trembling. The last thing I saw before my phone screen glitched out completely was a blurry image, a photo of me standing in that room. But I had been alone, hadn't I? I dropped my phone, my breath hitched as I stared at the screen. The image lingered in my mind. That shadow, was it just a trick of the light? A glitch? I wanted to believe that. I needed to believe that. But deep down, I knew the truth. My apartment suddenly felt suffocating. Every shadow seemed darker, every sound magnified. I locked my bedroom door and sat on the bed, knees pulled to my chest. I wasn't alone, even if I couldn't see it. I could feel it watching. The weight of unseen eyes pressed against me. Then something moved, a barely perceptible shift in the dim light. My closet door, which had been closed, was now slightly ajar. My stomach dropped. I hadn't opened it. I hadn't even touched it. But there it was, open just enough for someone to be standing behind it. I forced myself to breathe. My rational mind screamed that I was being paranoid, but my instincts, the same instincts that had warned me in that locked room, told me to run. Slowly, I reached for my phone, my fingers numb with fear. A soft creak echoed through the room. The closet door inched open just a little more. My throat tightened. I stayed frozen, my mind racing. Should I confront it? Should I bolt before I could decide? My phone buzzed in my trembling hand. Another message. You brought it with you. My vision blurred with panic. A sharp, high-pitched whisper filled the room. It wasn't coming from the closet. It was right behind me. Cold breath brushed against my neck. I didn't think I ran. Bolting from my room, I yanked the apartment door open and stumbled into the hallway, heart hammering. I didn't stop until I reached the lobby, gasping for air. The night clerk looked up, startled. "You okay?" he asked. I tried to speak, but only managed a hoarse whisper. "There's someone in my apartment." His face paled slightly. He stood up, hesitating. "Which room?" I told him. He didn't move, just stood there, his fingers twitching against the desk. Then finally, he sighed. "Listen, you need to leave that place. Now." "Why?" He glanced around, as if making sure no one else was listening, then lowered his voice. "You're not the first. That room, you went into it. It's been empty for years." He hesitated, then added, "But it's never really been empty." A chill ran through me. I turned toward the front doors, my instinct screaming at me to get out. As I stepped outside, I stole one last glance at the apartment building. From my window on the third floor, something was watching me, and it was smiling. Story 2. The crying neighbor in San Francisco. I moved into my new apartment in San Francisco last year, eager for a fresh start. It was a small one-bedroom unit in an older building, but the rent was surprisingly low for the city. At the time, I didn't question it. I figured it was just my luck. But now, I know better. There was a reason why that place had been empty for so long. The first few nights passed without issue. I spent my time unpacking, arranging furniture, and getting used to the old building's quirks. The walls were thin, and the floors creaked under my steps, but that was normal for a place this old. Occasionally, I'd hear muffled sounds from other apartments, TVs, footsteps, the hum of conversation. But on the fourth night, I heard something different. It started around 2 a.m. A soft, muffled crying from the apartment next to mine. It was faint at first, barely noticeable, but as I focused on it, the sound became clearer. A woman's voice, choked and broken, like she was trying to hold back sobs. My first thought was that she was going through a breakup or dealing with a personal loss. It wasn't my business, so I ignored it and tried to sleep. But the crying didn't stop. Hours passed, and she kept going, sometimes fading, almost disappearing, only to return with even more intensity. By 4 a.m., I was wide awake, staring at the wall that separated us. The sound wasn't just sad, it was disturbing. There was a pattern to it, a rhythm that felt wrong, like she wasn't just crying but pleading. The next morning, I finally saw my neighbor. She was thin and pale, with dark circles under her red-rimmed eyes. She wore an oversized hoodie, the sleeves pulled over her hands as she stepped into the hallway. She avoided my gaze, keeping her head down. I felt the urge to ask if she was okay, but something in her posture warned me not to. Instead, I just mumbled a polite "good morning." She flinched slightly, barely nodding before hurrying away. The moment she disappeared around the corner, a strange relief washed over me, like I had just avoided something dangerous. I shook it off. Maybe she was just shy, or maybe she had a good reason to keep to herself. That night, the crying came back, louder. It wasn't quiet grief anymore. It was desperate. It started earlier this time, right around midnight, choked sobs, ragged breaths, the kind of sound someone makes when they're trying not to scream. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my stomach twisting. Should I check on her? Should I call someone? I debated with myself for an hour before finally deciding to knock on her door. Stepping into the hallway, I felt an immediate sense of unease. The hallway was dim, the overhead light flickering slightly. I hesitated in front of her door, raising my hand, but before I could knock, the crying stopped instantly. My skin prickled. I stood there, heart pounding, straining to hear any movement. Then, footsteps, slow, deliberate, approaching the door from the other side. I swallowed hard. My voice felt weak when I finally spoke. "Hey, are you okay?" Silence. Then a whisper, barely audible through the wood. "Don't let it in." I took a step back. "What?" I asked, my throat dry. But she didn't answer. The footsteps retreated, and the crying started again, softer this time, like she was trying to control it. I backed away from the door and hurried into my own apartment, locking the door behind me. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I started drifting off, Her words echoed in my mind. Don't let it in. What did she mean? Was someone bothering her? Was she in danger? Or was it something else? The next day, I tried to put it out of my mind. I told myself she was probably dealing with mental health issues, that I was reading too much into things. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. The feeling in my gut wouldn't go away. That evening, I went to take out the trash and ran into my landlord, Mr. Holloway. He was an older man, balding, with thick glasses, and always seemed slightly distracted. Figuring I might as well ask, I casually brought up my neighbor. The girl in 3B, I said, frowning. What about her? I hesitated. She cries a lot at night. I just wanted to make sure she's okay. His expression darkened. He adjusted his glasses and looked down the hall toward her door. There's no one in 3B. A chill ran down my spine. I let out a nervous laugh. No, I mean, I've seen her. She's got dark hair, kind of pale. I know who you mean, he interrupted, his voice tight. But that apartment has been empty for months. I stared at him, my mind struggling to process what he was saying. That's not possible. I've heard her. I've seen her. Mr. Holloway sighed. Look, kid, you're not the first tenant to mention her. His voice dropped lower. But every time I check, 3B is locked. No one's inside. I felt lightheaded. Then, who have I been hearing? He didn't answer. Instead, he muttered something about maintenance and walked away, leaving me standing there, cold all over. That night, the crying didn't come at 2:00 a.m. It came at midnight, and this time, it was right outside my door. I sat up in bed, my entire body rigid. The sound was closer than ever, as if she was standing right there in the hallway. The sobs were deeper now, trembling and wet, like someone struggling to breathe. I reached for my phone, my fingers shaking. Then, a knock, soft, just once. I held my breath. The knock came again, slightly louder this time. My pulse pounded in my ears. I forced myself to move, creeping toward the door. My peephole was old and scratched, but I pressed my eye against it. At first, I saw nothing, just the empty hallway. Then, slowly, I saw movement. A figure pressed against my door, too close. Her head was tilted forward, her hair hanging in tangled strands. Her shoulders shook with silent sobs. I barely choked back a gasp. I couldn't see her face. She was standing in a way that wasn't natural, her body pressed against the wood, too still, too rigid. I swallowed, my throat dry. Then she spoke, but her lips didn't move. The voice came from inside my apartment. Don't let it in. I spun around, my heart seizing. The room behind me was empty. My breaths came fast and shallow. Slowly, I turned back to the peephole. She was gone, but a single wet handprint remained on my door. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on my bed, back pressed against the wall, staring at my front door. My mind replayed what had just happened over and over, but none of it made sense. I knew what I saw. I knew what I heard. But the most terrifying part, the the her voice, had come from inside my apartment. By sunrise, I forced myself to check the door. My breath hitched when I saw the handprint, still there, smudged and streaky, like someone had been dragging their fingers down the wood. I hesitated before pressing my palm against it. It was ice cold. I spent the rest of the morning trying to rationalize everything. Maybe I had been half asleep and imagined it. Maybe the crying had just been a trick of the old pipes. Maybe a sharp knock made me jump. I spun around, heart pounding, but this time it wasn't coming from my door. It was coming from 3B. I edged toward the peephole and peered through. The hallway was empty. No one was knocking. But as I listened closer, I realized something. The knock wasn't on the door, it was from inside. I stumbled back, nearly tripping over my own feet. My breathing was ragged, my hands shaking. The knock came again, this time louder, more urgent. And then a whisper, "Please, let me out." My entire body locked up. The voice was familiar, her voice, but something about it was wrong. It sounded strained, like someone forcing their vocal cords to work. I stood frozen, every part of me screaming to run, but my feet wouldn't move. Then the whisper changed. "Don't let it in." I felt sick. My stomach twisted painfully, and for the first time since moving in, I wanted out. Whatever was happening here, whatever was in 3B, it wasn't normal. I grabbed my jacket and practically ran out of my apartment. I didn't come back until nightfall. When I returned, I took a deep breath before unlocking my door. The hallway was silent, no crying, no knocking, just the distant hum of the city outside. I stepped inside cautiously, half expecting to see something waiting for me in the dark. But nothing was out of place. My apartment was exactly how I left it. I let out a shaky breath and locked the door behind me. Maybe I had imagined the knocking. Maybe it was just my nerves. But as I turned to set my keys down, I froze. There was something new on my front door, carved into the wood. Deep, jagged scratches were 3 words. "Let me in." I staggered back, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Let me in." The words were scratched into the wood, uneven and erratic, like they had been carved in a frenzy. My fingers hovered over the grooves, the edges splintered and rough. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Every shadow in my apartment felt too deep, too wrong. Every creak of the building made me jump. But the worst part, the crying, was back. It started around 2:00 a.m., soft at first, almost like a distant echo. But this time, it wasn't coming from 3B. It was inside my apartment. I squeezed my eyes shut, my breath coming in short, panicked bursts. This isn't real. But then, in the silence between the sobs, I heard something worse. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, moving closer. I didn't think. I bolted from my bed, fumbling with the lock on my door. My hands were shaking so hard, I nearly dropped my keys. The crying grew louder, shifting from sadness to something else. something wrong, a low, broken laugh. I flung open the door and sprinted down the hallway, barely registering that 3 door was now wide open. The darkness inside was impossibly deep, swallowing all light, and in that black void, something moved. I didn't stop. I ran until I was outside, gasping in the cold night air, my body trembling. I didn't go back inside, not that night, not ever. The next morning, I returned with my landlord. I told him everything about the crying, the scratching, the voice. He looked uneasy, but didn't question me. When he unlocked my apartment, everything was normal. No carvings on the door, no shadows in the corner, just an empty, ordinary space. Then we checked 3B. It was abandoned. The walls were stripped, the furniture covered in dust. But in the center of the room, carved into the wooden floor, was the same message from my door. Let me in. I moved out that day. I never found out what happened in 3B, but sometimes, late at night, I think about that whisper. Don't let it in. And I wonder, did I? Story 3. The whispering apartment in Indianapolis. Moving to Indianapolis was supposed to be a fresh start. I had landed a solid job downtown, and all I needed was a quiet place to stay. I wasn't picky, just something affordable, clean, and close to work. When I found a listing for a 3rd-floor apartment in an older building, it seemed too good to pass up. The rent was surprisingly low for the area, but when I asked the landlord why, he just shrugged and said, "Not much history here, just an old place." At the time, I didn't question it. The apartment itself was simple 1-bedroom, a tiny kitchen, and a living area. It smelled like dust and stale air, like no one had lived there in a while. The walls were bare, slightly yellowed with age, and the floors creaked in odd places. Nothing unusual, just old. I moved in quickly, unpacking the essentials in a single evening. My first few nights were uneventful, just the usual apartment noises. Footsteps from the unit above, muffled conversations through the thin walls, the occasional creak of old pipes. I was too tired from work to care. But then, on the 4th night, I woke up abruptly. Something felt off. I wasn't sure what had woken me, maybe a noise. I lay still, listening. The room was silent, except for the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. But there was this strange weight in the air, like someone had just been standing near my bed, watching. I shook it off as a dream and rolled over, trying to sleep. But as I drifted off, I heard something, a faint whisper. It was too soft to make out, a voice, but not from inside my room. I held my breath, straining to hear. The sound was coming from the closet. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe a neighbor's TV, maybe my half-asleep brain playing tricks on me. Still, I didn't sleep much that night. The next morning, I checked the closet, just my unpacked boxes and a few hanging shirts. Nothing unusual. But after that night, things started changing. The apartment was always cold, no matter how high I turned up the heat. At first, I blamed the old insulation, but certain spots were worse than others, especially near the closet. The overhead light in my bedroom flickered constantly. My phone charger, plugged in overnight, would be unplugged by morning. And then there was the feeling of being watched. It started subtle, like the sensation of someone standing behind you. But over the next few days, it became constant. Sitting on my couch, brushing my teeth, even working at my desk, I felt eyes on me. I checked my windows, making sure no one could see inside, but the blinds were always shut. Then, a week after moving in, I heard it again. I was watching TV when a whisper drifted from behind me. "Stay." I froze. It had been right behind me, not from the walls, not from the ceiling, from the couch itself. I jumped up, heart pounding. My apartment was empty. I checked the closet, the bathroom, even under the bed. Nothing. I tried to convince myself I had imagined it, but I knew better. After that night, I started sleeping with the lights on. One night, I was lying in bed, unable to sleep. The apartment was silent, too silent. It felt like the entire building was holding its breath. Then, the sound of something shifting, a slow, dragging noise. It was coming from the closet. I sat up, my throat dry. The closet door was shut, but the sound was unmistakable. Something inside was moving. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and took slow steps toward the closet. My hand hovered over the knob. I counted to 3 in my head and yanked the door open. Nothing, just my clothes, my boxes. But the air was freezing, and for a split second, I swore I saw the hangers sway, as if something had just brushed past them. I slammed the door shut and backed away. I didn't open it again that night. The next day at work, I couldn't focus. My boss even asked if I was feeling okay. I told him I was just tired, which was true. I hadn't slept properly in days. But the real reason was the apartment. I didn't want to go home. That night, I made a decision. I had to find out more about this place. The landlord had said there was not much history. But when I searched my apartment's address online, I found nothing, no rental listings, no old property records, no past complaints. It was like my apartment didn't exist before a few years ago. I dug deeper, searching forums, old news articles, anything. And that's when I found it, a post on a small Indianapolis ghost stories forum. The title made my blood run cold. Do not rent apt 3C. It was posted 2 years ago by an anonymous user. The message was short. If you're in apartment 3C, get out. I don't care how cheap it is. I lasted 2 months. The whispering, the cold spots, the feeling of being watched, it only gets worse. It knows when you notice it, and when you do, it won't let you leave. I stared at the screen, my heart hammering. I wasn't crazy. Someone else had experienced the same things. Before I could react, my phone buzzed, A new email from my landlord. Subject: urgent. We need to talk. My hands were shaking as I clicked on the email. The message was short. Call me as soon as possible. It's about your unit. I stared at the screen, my pulse pounding in my ears. The landlord had barely spoken to me since I moved in. Why now? I grabbed my phone and dialed his number. He picked up almost instantly. You're in 3C, right? His voice was tense. Yeah, why? I asked. There was a long pause, then, in a quieter tone, he said, Have you noticed anything? The way he said it, like he already knew, made my stomach drop. I swallowed hard. Like what? Another pause. Then the whispering. A cold chill crept down my spine. He knew he already knew. Look, he continued, his voice hurried. I shouldn't be telling you this, but you need to get out. Whatever deal I gave you, forget it. Break your lease. Move. I could barely process what I was hearing. What the hell is going on? He hesitated, then muttered, Something's wrong with that apartment. Every tenant in 3C leaves, some last months, some only days, but none of them stay. And the ones who do, his voice trailed off. The ones who do what? I pressed. But before he could answer, my phone cut off. The call ended. I stared at the screen, no signal, no Wi-Fi. The apartment was silent, except for the faint creak of the walls settling. And then, from the closet, a whisper. Stay. I stood frozen, my phone still clutched in my hand. The whisper had been unmistakable, too close, too clear. It hadn't come from the hallway or the vents. It had come from inside my closet. I took a slow, shaky step back. My mind raced for a rational explanation, but there was none. I had locked the closet door myself. No one could be in there, another whisper. Don't leave. My breath hitched. The doorknob to the closet rattled. Panic surged through me. I stumbled toward the front door, fumbling with the deadbolt. My hands were slick with sweat, making it impossible to turn. The rattling behind me grew more frantic, as if something inside was trying to get out. Then, just as suddenly as it started, silence. I didn't dare turn around. The apartment felt suffocating, the air thick with something unseen. I yanked the door open and ran into the hallway, not stopping until I was outside. The cold night air stung my face, but I barely noticed. I needed answers now. I drove to the landlord's office, my hands trembling on the wheel. When I arrived, the place was dark except for a single light inside. I pounded on the glass. After a long moment, the landlord finally opened the door. His face was pale. He already knew why I was there. Did you hear it? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. What is in that apartment? I demanded. He exhaled shakily. I don't know, but I do know this. Apartment 3C never had a previous tenant. My stomach dropped. What are you talking about? He reached into a drawer and pulled out a file. It was empty, no rental history, no records. That unit shouldn't exist, he whispered. But somehow, people keep moving in. A deep, bone-chilling dread settled over me. I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going back. I never returned for my things, and I never looked back. But sometimes, in the dead of night, I swear I can still hear it, a whisper. Come,